I love starting out with a black canvas. I'm actually just using acrylic paint and mixing it with water to get that very thin layer. We want to keep the water paint mixture nice and thin because it dries faster, and that allows you to build up the layers. Of course, it's fine to have thicker layers underneath. In fact, that's part of why I like to paint over paintings, because it creates a natural layer of texture. So, worst case scenario, you make a painting that turns out terribly and you paint over it, and it's the history of your next painting. I'm realizing I forgot to put my little towel here. I just got this new easel. I love art supplies, but I think it can be important to not fall into the trap of constantly getting new art stuff instead of actually just making the art. So I have to take a minute. I enjoy making paintings over... Okay, what am I trying to say? 1 second, I gotta gather my thoughts. Oh, this... Starting out a painting with a base layer like this is good for your meditative state as you enter into your painting, because it allows you to just let go. Honestly, I think that the color that I'm using isn't even pure black. It's a mixture that I made. You can see this is more of a pure black. As long as it's dark and covers the canvas pretty well, because I'll build up the negative space as I go. I feel like that's a really solid start to my painting. I mean, you can't go wrong. It's a black background. And this is why we start off small. Alright, so the next thing you want to consider as a painter is, where are you going to position your subject matter? So, I happen to be positioning this particular poison dart frog right in the middle. I don't even know if I mentioned the fact that I'm painting a poison dart frog until just now. Okay, so we're thinking about the position. I did generate an image using AI. And one keyword I always use in my AI, what I use is Midjourney. You type in words and it creates your image. And I know there are people who have their thoughts about that. And what I will say is, for me personally, I just try not to overthink where my inspiration comes from. I try to tap into every resource available to me, and with using AI as a reference, it's kind of bringing up an interesting conversation about where does the art start and stop? If someone paints it, does it become art when it's painted? And doesn't that disqualify the AI painting in and of itself, because it's more of just a concept? Just a question to ask yourself, and put in the comments what you think. So don't overthink too much. Just paint. I'm in my head a lot sometimes. Alright. I'm using a relatively large brush to start out with, because that's going to encourage me to paint wide strokes and to not focus so much on the little tiny things as much. Those need to be, we're looking at the larger gestures. Okay. I forgot to mix the particular shade of yellow that I want to do, but right now I'm just going into my regular yellow paint, and I'm going to basically create a tilted almond oval shape, basically in the center of my painting. This is the body of the frog. And it doesn't have to be exactly right. Trust me, we're going to move it as we go. We're going to move everything around. Let's paint a circle near the end of the almond, and that is the eyeball. Right now, we're plotting out the general placement of things, not the specific placement. There's an eyeball on the other side of the almond shape, but it's half a circle, and it's placed just above and kind of slanted to the right of the lower eye. Do you see? It's coming along already. And please don't compare your art to mine, because everybody's art is unique and beautiful, and we all walk away wishing there were things different about our painting. But the good news is that means you're learning. So, yeah. We're gonna mix mustard yellow. I'm using Gaffrey acrylic paint. And all right, squeezing that on there. That's perfect. Eventually I want to get a camera for my paints so you guys can really see them coming together. And then all right, essentially this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna take a big blob of yellow. This is my Gaffer yellow. You can see it's very thick. We're gonna mix that with my brown. Oh, I forgot to put red on here. Hang on. I'm just gonna use regular acrylic. What is this? Standard acrylics. Okay, I was right. Amsterdam. I love Amsterdam, so this is just paint from Nichols. So take just a tiny bit of red. Now remember, red is super potent, so I'm talking like barely any red. And even a little bit of blue to kind of make it green, which is the opposite. Or it's not totally the opposite, but it's gonna make it seem more mustardy if you put a little red and a little green in there. See? That's a beautiful mustard shade. And it's so thick and yummy. Now we're gonna make a highlighted version of that color. So take your white. White is your most valuable color on your palette. Maybe not, but you'll use it the most if you're anything like me. So this white is basically out. See? That's okay, because I have a whole new tube. I'm trying to make this look cute and it's just not cute. Hang on. Kids, don't try that at home. Alright. There's no kids on my channel, don't worry. Alright. I just blobbed out quite a bit of this white. We should be good to go. Take a bunch of white and mix it with a tiny bit of yellow. It's alright if a little bit of the color next to it gets in, which is the mustard. If you don't have the right colors, it's like building a house without the right tools. It's just gonna fall apart. And it's not gonna work, and no one's gonna be happy anymore. Okay. Now let's make a darker version of this mustard. Taking a tiny bit as like almost a sourdough sample of that yellow, and then adding it with more of the pure yellow color. And that's going to be like a middle shade, and then taking some of that, and I'm going to mix it with a little bit more red and a little more brown just to make it like a darker browny yellow. I don't know if that's too dark. No, I think it's okay because we'll mix it up later with some of the other shades. Alright, so if your paint palette looks anything like that, good. I usually keep rags and jars around at all times. Jars for the water, rags for the paint to wipe it off, and then it'll dry. And you just keep using that rag over and over again. And I also prefer furniture in my studio that is cheap or used or damaged in some way, so that if I get paint on it, it's fine. So this is how you have to think as a painter. Even my clothes, a lot of them are used, actually relatively inexpensive. A little bit of paint on my coffee. Okay. I mean, I do have some clothes that I just wouldn't paint in, but then I have all my tricks on how to get paint out of your clothes as long as you catch it and you're aware of how to handle it. I have my ways. So, all right, let's go into this with a little more direction and purpose. We're going to go in and we are going to create the legs. The legs are a bubble letter V shape. That's the best way I can put it. And they're kind of squished together. The little booty is right above the abdomen. There we go. Let me show you really quickly on a smaller canvas a little demonstration of what I'm doing. Okay? I honestly thought about using this as the final thing, but look, this is the overall shape we're doing. It's like an oval, a little belly here. These are the legs. It's like a tilted V. It's a little out of proportion in this sketch. The eyes are right here. The mouth is a little bit bigger. And then the arm is going to come down like a crooked, like a broken L or something. And then there's actually a little hand back here in the shadow. And there's little hands that come out this way and that peek out from under there. So that's kind of the overall shape. Even though that looks very preliminary, you have to break it down into these things so that you can actually get the job done. And then you build onto that structural aspect. All right, so don't be afraid to add paint because you can always paint over it. In here it's yellow, but there are stripes on this frog, so I'm leaving space to approximately where the black blobs will be on this frog. Okay, the eyes are a little bit bigger than what I have on here. So I'm making a note to self, meaning I'm changing it enough so that when I go back in to that area, I know what I'm doing and I see what needs to be fixed and I remember what I thought to myself in that moment. So I went ahead and I filled in the body, leaving some indication of lines where the black will go. And I'm just taking this brownish color and working it in underneath the body, around the head. I almost feel like this is even too long of a torso. This is why you go in and you try to work the whole thing at once, because as you add things in, you might need to adjust other things. Here's the arm. Oh my god, it's so funny in this AI image. The hand is really fucked up, so we're gonna fix that. And right now I'm just indicating around where it's gonna be. I have my iced coffee, even though it's cold outside. Honestly, especially because it's cold outside, because the colder it is, the quicker my hot coffee gets cold, and I'm a slow drinker. So all right, well, we're starting to see it on there a little bit. Okay. So in here, I'm going to take a bunch of my white and I'm going to make a shape that indicates that he is on something physically, like a rock. It's almost like a moon shape or a point that's angled, like whew. And it's going to come under this direction. And I actually have to use my imagination because my canvas is bigger than the image I'm using as a reference. So I'm extending it. And I'm using large expressive brush marks. That's the great thing about painting, is it looks like paint. Let's integrate that a little bit with the black that we have in the background just by taking more black and just pushing it into the white. Very good. I like it. I think it works for now. All right. Let's effort to plot in the lower left foot. Maybe it's the right foot. I don't know. It's like a angled V shape and then a little ball on top. That's like the little toe. And then it's going out directly to the left from there. Then you circle, circle, circle. And then a little ball over here where the thumb would be, but the thumb doesn't really have as much of a length. All right, in here, that's going to connect. I took my black to blend it in because it's underneath the knee, and I'm reshaping the leg a little bit to where it feels like it's tucked under a little bit more, a little more squat. As you put in the different elements of the painting, it's good to move other elements around because that's how it emerges. You don't really know where anything goes until it's in context with something else. I'm looking at that negative space. This actually feels like it needs to be way closer to the little hand. And this is why we don't develop anything too early on, because we're still moving everything around and making sure we know where things are placed. Don't get freaked out if you need to restructure something. The best artists in the world do this. So let me know in the comments if you have any questions. I might need to switch out my water. Okay, so essentially I'm restructuring both of the hands together, and I'm making sure that everything lines up by looking at the negative space, which means the space in between the things that you think it is you're painting. That's why we paint the background with the foreground. Like in the image, this toe is like right next to the wrist. So I'm kind of recalculating. And this would go somewhere in trying to figure out where the foot would go because it's in the shadow, so we don't necessarily need to paint the whole thing at this moment. All right, that's good for now. Of course, this looks bulky and weird, so we're gonna take the black, which I'm running out of black. There we go. All right, we're going to take the black and we're going to paint around the chunkiness to find the shape again, and we're going to paint over some of the earlier mistakes. Perfect. All right. There's a little bit of the chest showing through in the darkness in here, and I just want to add that in. To make sure that I have my face, the face of the frog, in the right position. Everything needs to be in the frame and painted before you develop and enhance and add the little highlights, because you want to make sure everything is intact. I'm adding a little line below the top, below the nose. That's the mouth. Taking the black, cutting back into it to refine it a little bit, and taking the black and using it to create the space in between the lips of the frog. I don't know what you would call those. I need to learn frog anatomy. And as I'm doing that, I'm going in and I'm creating this design that is on the frog. Notice how I paint everything together. One thing leads to the next. That's important to note. And the top of his eyelid is looking a little round, so let's soften it a little bit. And then that kind of comes to a bony angle at the base of the body, and it's shorter than the leg. So I'm cropping it in. The top of the leg is smaller than the base of the leg, and the base of the leg comes out further than the tailbone of the frog. These are some things to keep in mind. The eye that you see, the full eye, is placed lower and diagonal to the eye on the other side of the face. It's a little pointy, so I'm taking the negative space with the black and kind of pulling it in. And let's carve out the nose a little bit. Now I'm going to take my mustardy yellow and I'm mixing it with my red to make somewhat of an orange. And I'm doing this motion with my brush. I'm having a hard time figuring out It's like creating width to the frog's face, shading the eye. This isn't the exact color that I need, but it'll do for now. Something I was thinking about earlier is a lot of times in the earlier stages of your painting, you just need to find the color that represents the color that you're trying to get in the painting. Okay. And then as you go, you can refine the colors. Okay. Underneath the eye, wait, we're adding structure to the face basically. So there's like this side of the face that's like away from us. It's a little darker. It kind of hides behind the eye that's most visible to us. In doing that, I'm kind of restructuring the eye a little bit, pushing it back. And then let's add with our bright canary yellow, a highlight right here. We're feeling out the space underneath the right eye, and it's making me realize that the eye needs to be positioned lower. Before I do that, I'm going to take a little bit of brown, the brownish color we mixed, and I'm going to create this nose structure that connects to the eye. It's basically a shadow that comes out of the inner corner of the eye. Nothing has to look exactly how you want it to look right away. Now we're going to take a highlight and put that highlight right above it. Little by little, we're creating structure to the frog. There's a highlight here. There's actually going to be a highlight right in here. Somewhere in there on the eye. Just plotting it in somewhat. I probably don't need it to be that thick of paint yet, so because I don't know exactly where it's going to be, but it's somewhere in there. There's a highlight on this side of the eye as well. And there's the eyeball that is visible very slightly, and I feel like the nose is coming out way too far. I'm going to crop that in a little bit by making it rounder. The eye far away from us needs to have a little bit more width. And a little highlight to show us that it's there. I still feel like that in here feels a bit round, a little too round. I'm glad I used a bigger canvas than I thought I needed, because when you're painting the figure of any kind, you have to give yourself enough space to get it on there correctly. So you gotta be able to move through the form without it feeling too squished. Because the form, any type of form, it occupies real dimensional space. So we're trying to capture that on a two-dimensional space. Not always an easy task, so these are the little tips and tricks I'm trying to tell you about. Okay. So we made that look shorter. Kind of bring it up. Make this shadow a little darker in here. There we go. And then let's make the eye a little bit bigger. Because I'm noticing the space in here isn't quite right. There was less space between the mouth and the eye than what I had. So I needed to make sure I fixed that. Now after doing that, I have to create the eyelid again, which is kind of like a little C shape coming around the outside of the eye, which we will be highlighting and working in later. Speaking of highlight, take your light yellow, your lightest yellow, and make this even lighter in there to really bring that shape home for the viewer. And later we will use a smaller brush in there as well. Alright, I'm going to highlight the arm by creating a light yellow streak, making a little ball-ish shape at the elbow. As it goes down, the highlight is darker because it's in the shadow. And then the hand, which we had to restructure. I want to make sure that it's as big as it is, as big as it needs to be. I think it's easy to make hands smaller than they are. I know that these are, I don't know what it is. Is it a hand? I just don't know the anatomy of frogs and reptiles that well. Okay. There we go. There we go. Cleaning this up a little bit, defining it a little bit, adding the highlight on the knee of the frog again, and then doing a side to side little highlight motion on the top of the leg. Alright, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and kind of just add more paint in this body area. And I'm painting the form. I'm not painting around it. I'm painting the form. So I'm kind of doing brush strokes and in the direction that I think that it would go if it was right in front of me, as if my hand was on the form. Okay. Underneath the belly needs to be darker. And behind the arm, so I'm adding black. And then there's this big black design on the frog, which I'm just going to plot it in. Shaping the hand by covering it up with the negative space. It still looks a little off, but I'm going to go in with a smaller brush later and fix it up. Adding the stripe, a rounded stripe that kind curves over the leg, and then a couple stripes around the knee. When you're doing stripes like this, it's like you have to go round, round, think round. If that makes sense. Okay? I hope those little demonstrations are helpful. Okay, so it's good to take a break. It's good to walk away from your painting and to see it from a different perspective. So remember that I took a break and I came back. What I'm going to do is flip it upside down. This allows you to see your painting from a different perspective. And I also flipped my reference upside down. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is find my smaller paintbrush. It's still not that small, but it's smaller and pointier than the other one. This is going to allow me to refine the shapes. Painting a little bit of dark brown underneath the body, as well as between the arm and the leg, the little tummy area. This is the point in the painting where I question if it's worth continuing, because it's like you can see it there and you can see it coming to life, but you're not sure if you like it or not. You gotta push through that feeling. Alright, adding one of the stripes here behind the leg that connects to that stripe. A few stripes on the arms, curving around the arm. We talked about that. We're also taking the black and shaping up the fingers by making the fingers more narrow and the tips of the fingers more refined and circular. Making the tips of the fingers more refined and circular. Using the negative space to inform the positive space, taking away some of the width of the arm. There we go. Let's do the same thing to the other foot. Making the tips of the fingers round, solidifying the shape. Okay. This is a very dark painting, so we really need to push the highlights. We're going to take that light. Oh man, I need to definitely get more water, especially if I'm going to be highlighting. I'll be right back. A lot of my paint is drying up, so I have to use it before it dries. Highlighting the arm, making it brighter with the light white shade, even making the medium tones of yellow more solid. Down here, where the arm kind of curves away, that's where it needs to be tan. The little arms and legs, think of them as a cylinder. Adding the darker brownish yellow on the legs. Shading it, building up the paint. This leg kind of disappears into the darkness. Taking the black and refining the shape of the stripes by building up the paint. Recreating that highlight on the leg. I want it to blend a little bit more with the color around it, so I'm adding more yellow around the white so that they feel connected. The very top of the leg, it's like, and into the torso, it's like these little highlights that make it look shiny. Let's make the top of this frog more yellow, brighter. Recreating a little bit of the shapes between the stripes. I encourage you to flip your painting upside down more than once in your creative process. There we go. That looks so good. Oops. Okay. Shaping around the eye. Once we build up more paint, we can do more shaping as well. Making sure that I take care of the hand that's further away from us and it's in the shadow, it's barely there. We still need to take care of it. Adding some width to it with, it's almost like I'm highlighting the shadow. It reminds me of the little Randall fingers. Alright, let's highlight this hand as well. Do the same thing. Just add some of that banana pale yellow. Extending the finger. There we go. That looks good. How is yours coming along? I want more coffee. Okay. I'm noticing that this doesn't really look like a shape. There's little tweaks that need to happen to really make it come to life. Those tweaks come together to create something magical, hopefully. Highlighting the little hands coming out in the darkness. The little ball at the tip of the hand over there as well. Highlighting the little calf area and connecting that to a brighter yellow, and that is encouraging me to bring up some of the yellow in some of the other areas as well. But we want to keep that gradient there. I'll show you what I mean. Here's the mustard. Here's the dark mustard. Here's the light banana yellow. And together, that's a gradient of color. You get the picture. We're doing that. Highlighting and then blending the highlights into the shadows. It's a dance, for sure. And I'm using textured paint, but I'm withholding the texture in a way. Okay. Let's add this highlight here and here. And then like little like dots basically in here. I'm trying to figure out the shape of this black stripe by exploring the yellow in between. Again, negative space. Just doing a little bit of a stippling motion. This is where there's texture on the skin of the frog. Instead of painting the entire, like every little thing, I'm just doing a little technique that gives the viewer an idea of what's happening, and then the viewer will fill in the rest of the information. Painted that a little bit out of the lines. All right. I'm taking a look at this black shape. Let's add a little bit more of a strong mustard yellow here at the base. That looks good. I'm trying to figure out what's going on in here. It's a combination of highlights and shadows. All right. There's part of the stripe. There's part of another stripe that connects. There's a stripe on the knee. And then there's a space in there that I don't think I really accounted for, so I'm adding some yellow right in there. And on this side too. And then highlighting that as well. Blending that up. And then connecting that in there. There's nothing there. And then connecting that to the shadow. making the yellow, adding mustard yellow behind this little moment, adding some black around the leg, shaping in here. Let's blend that in with the yellow around it, using just straight from the tube yellow, which I'm using sparingly. Okay. I need more yellow on my palette. My advice is to add more paint than you think you need. Embrace the notion that you are going to waste paint. It's okay. It's part of the process. You have to waste paint to make good paintings. And I can tell that this elbow just needs to be smaller. And then the back of the frog could be a little bit more snatched. Okay. What was I doing? Alright, so in here, adding some mustard, and we're basically going back and forth between the mustard, the canary yellow, and the banana yellow, and then the black to add the stripes. So there's a stripe in here we want to focus on. I can see that I noticed it earlier. And there's a bright yellow spot in between, like in there, somewhere in there, right above the arm, placed behind the eye, connected to this black shadow-ish area. Let's move this highlight back behind the eye a little bit more. Good. We're going to actually add some bright yellow around this highlight as well. You can see it's starting to pop. Okay. Highlighting the moon around the eye a little bit. Let's take some of this mustard yellow and combine it with this bright canary yellow, just to make the canary yellow not so flat. We need it sparingly, if that makes sense. There's a shadow in here on the nose that is subtle. Needs to definitely happen though. It's like there's a shadow, and then there's a highlight, then another shadow. Right now I'm just shading, and then I'll add highlights. Let's make the nose kind of curve down a little more. There's a little bit of the arm kind of peeking through the shadow, the underbelly kind of coming through. Let's highlight the moon around the eye a little bit. Highlight the top of it. And then the portion that's closest, if it was a crescent moon, the part that's touching the eye ball is the part that we're going to aim to highlight. There we go. I like it. We're going to just kind of scumble a little bit, which means adding the lighter over the darker, allowing the darker to kind of show through the light. There's a black design in here, indicating a little bit of a leg back there connected. But we still need to make it nice and dark because it's still kind of bright. It's like it's supposed to be very much in the shadow. Using the black to crop in on it. There we go. When the paint dries, I'll be able to see it better as well. I do think this needs to be shaded a little bit. I was feeling a little bit flat. Squinting my eyes, I can see the shapes better. Alright, I need an even smaller brush. Before I go back into it though, let's just paint the background black again. And maybe work on the rock a little bit more. Okay. Running out of black. Alright, so scumbling over the white, allowing some of the white to come through. This is the rock it's on. It's in the shadow, but it's still catching the light. We don't want the froggy to be floating. It's not a magical frog. It is and it isn't. Poison dart frogs are magical in a way, I suppose. I worked on the rock a little bit. Let's just work on it a little bit more. Make this feel more solid and strong. Like some cracks in it with the black. And it's important to kind of see everything as abstract so that you don't get too hung up on it, because it's a painting and nothing is what it actually is. It's just shapes and colors, basically. Okay. Now I'm looking for my smaller paintbrush. I brought a lot of my paintbrushes home, so yeah. This one will do. It's a square tip. That's going to allow me to really get into the little nooks and crannies. We're going to strengthen the line of the mouth. I used a little bit of water to thin it out to make it easier to work with. Now we're taking some brown and painting it underneath the body and blending that in with the black, because that's the under part of the frog. Filling in some of this black. There's a little black line right there. There's a little black line here that's stronger. And they're not perfectly straight either, so if it's wobbly, that's fine. There's a black line here at the elbow. Little dots and speckles underneath. Perfect. Making that feel more crisp. Beautiful. Adding a little line underneath the eye with black. We're gonna take some of that mustard yellow, create a little bridge on the eye, like that. And then it connects. There we go. I need to make a new light yellow. We're making highlights. Here's another little highlight on the nose, the top of that shadow. We're going to increase the highlight in the eye here as well. Increase a little bit of a highlight in here where the light and the dark meet. The lighter yellow and the darker yellow meet. There's a highlight. And then right there on the elbow, there's a highlight on the outside of the hand, connecting to the fingers. There we go. At the knee. There's a highlight on this side of the eye as well. I'm going to mix a little bit in with the yellow in here. It's a dark brown behind the eye. Well, not dark brown, but it's the brown yellow mixture we made. shading mouth. This part's tedious for sure. Blending that dark brown in with the mustard, making that gradient that we talked about. Brown to mustard to yellow to white. That looks good. Doing my best to look at the things in between the things. Here's a big black little spot. A big little spot. It's just a big little spot, that's all. Okay. Adding a darker brown in here. It's like it just needs more lights and darks, because look at the tip of the nose, I'm adding a little bit of a light spot. I'm going in and shading around the eye and looking at how some of these colors come together visually. In here, it just needs to feel like there's width to the back. So I'm building up the paint a little more. Using textured paint like this has its pros and cons. It's nice that it builds up, it looks so thick, but it can be a little bit challenging to work with when you're trying to make something that's representational. Representational art isn't necessarily realistic, but it's representing realism. It's representing what's like, you know what that painting is, but like it's not photorealism. Little highlight here. Feels a bit muddy in here because I kind of kept repositioning. He almost looks like Geico. The Geico guy. I need to make that a little black line between the moon and the star in the eye. Sometimes you have to mess it up a little bit to bring it back. That's part of painting, honey. It's like reconstructive surgery. A little highlight on the eye. It's further away from us. Might be a bit too bright, but can tone it down a little bit. No problem. What do you think so far? I know it's upside down, but you can probably see kind of the direction it's going. Adding just a little bit more yellow underneath, kind of by the upper part of the arm. Is that too bright? Maybe I'll just tone it down a hair with the brown. Okay. Let's blend this in with that nice darker yellow. In here it's almost like it's scaly. I probably still did make his torso a bit too long. Hang on. I'm looking at this shape in here that we have, and it goes up this way. It's never too late to restructure. If you notice something, it's better to fix it. That's just going to separate you from everyone else, so that you take the time. Alright, so bringing this in a little bit. And then I'm going to use the negative space to cut into the tailbone area. Okay. Shaping up a lot of the space. There's someone downstairs in the wood shop, by the way. Okay, moving this little speckle in a little bit more. Using water to loosen up my paint and create a little bit of texture in here. And it's basically like making a wash, squinting some. I do that underneath the belly and take some of the yellow, kind of do almost like a stippling motion in a few places where it just seems a little bit more scaly, textured. You don't need to paint every little dot unless that's just your style, but sometimes it doesn't look right when you try to paint every little tiny thing. It's more so making a shadow over right here above this black spot, and then also in this bright yellow, just taking that brown and making a wash over, which means a thinner layer of paint. I feel like this area might not be flat enough. Let's take some of this black, which I might need to add more black to my canvas or to my paint palette. I feel like it's a little bit bonier in here, making it feel a bit crisp, hopefully. Paint's getting out of control. Highlighting the little tailbone area because it looks kind of greenish at the moment. We want it to feel connected to everything else, so in here, this needs to have like a little angle. Black and yellow can be a hard combination of colors to combine. Let's take a little break. It's good to see you. This is actually my second day of recording this painting process. I'm wearing the same outfit. To keep it cohesive as a video. So I hope that you are getting relaxed. Hopefully you're getting some helpful insights on painting, and I wanted to let you know that stepping away from your painting is a crucial part of the painting process. So make sure you step away from it. Make sure you step away from your painting. Sleep on it, come back to it. Even if you feel like you're at a really good stopping point with your painting, don't declare that you're totally done, because you never know when you're done. You might look at it a year from now and decide, oh, I want to go back into it, which happens to me all the time. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of being a painter. I mixed some of my colors already, and I have the intention of bringing out the highlights, making some of the lines a little more crisp, building up the paint in a few areas where it feels a bit thin, and we're just going to go into it. I'm going to go ahead and take a minute and mix a mustard yellow. I have quite a few colors on here, but I'm lacking my main mustard yellow color, so it's basically yellow and a little bit of brown, tiny bit of blue to give it that greenish look. It's a little too olivey, so we're going to take red to cut the green. And there we have it. There's our mustard. It's a nice color. One of my favorite colors, really. Okay. So, I'm actually gonna go in with use my smaller brush, this brush. I love this brush. It's long handle, so I can stay far away from my painting to get that perspective. If you're really up close to your painting, you're not going to be able to see it from a distance, which you really need to do in order to really develop it. And see how it's long? It's about, it's about a foot away from the canvas. So the first thing I'm noticing is I want to make the back feel rounded and not so flat. So I'll show you on here really quick. So if, say this is the back, we're going to do this motion with my painting. So it's like curving around the back. For lack of better words, that's what I'm doing. And I'm adding a little bit of width as well, because I cut into it with the black to make it smaller, and now I'm pushing back against the black, and it's good to do that back and forth. It's good to push the paint back and forth. That's what's going to give your painting it's going to give your painting the essence of depth. We're going to shade with the more brownish yellow in a few places as well on the top of the back, allowing the lighter yellow to be almost like a highlight. And we're going to reiterate that highlight with this banana yellow color that I mixed. Again, we're going back to that gradient situation where it's multiple shades of yellow next to each other. We've got this highlight. This is actually yellow, even though it looks like white compared to the other colors. I'm expanding the highlight a little bit bigger than it needs to be so that I can mix it with the straight canary yellow from the tube so that it looks less like white. And then we're going to blend that into this shadow using dark brown and light brown as a means for a gradient. Adding a little dot of yellow in the black, moving gradually to the eye and reiterating the moon next to the eye. Highlighting it closer to the black. Like, say if the moon is the eyelid, the part of the eyelid that's closer to the black of the eye is going to be highlighted. The part that's further away, that's wrapping around the eye, will be darker because it's moving away from us in a circular motion. Even if you're painting something small, it's good to use a canvas a little bit bigger than what you think you might need so that you have plenty of room to explore whatever it is that you're painting in that space. I almost got a smaller canvas than this for this frog, but I decided against it for that very reason. And I'm realizing that was a good decision because every little detail in the frog is so small. There's a shadow behind the eye. Alright, so I'm adding crisper lines to the black of the eyeball. It's okay if not every transition is crisp, but having that contrast of some areas that are really crisp and some areas that are not crisp feels realistic to the human eye, because not everything is super crisp in real life. But the black of an eyeball on a reptile is. If you go back and forth between the colors, it's okay. It's not linear. Painting is not linear. It's a back and forth thing. Plotting in a little nostril right there. I wanted to wait until I had more information on my canvas before I went in. We'll just add a little bit of yellow around it, and brown, yellow and brown mixed, to create that structure and separation. Let's do kind of popping around a little bit with my colors. We're going to do some texture in here. Adding little dots of the light banana yellow into the mustard to create the illusion of shine. We're going to add that light shine right back into there. I've been back and forth with it, but it looks pretty close to how I want it to look. Let's add a little bit more of a shine right here on the underneath the eye. I know that one of the advantages of oil paint is that things don't dry quickly, but I work with the dryness of acrylic, and I wait for it to dry, and then I feel like I'm able to layer it up better that way anyways. Does that make sense? I feel like this dress has like a poison dart frog vibe in a way. What do you think? Just glancing back at you a little bit. That's all. Okay. I don't know why, but in here just doesn't feel crisp enough, so there we go. That feels a little bit better. Sometimes texture can be frustrating because it's about finding that balance between smooth and textured, because if you can't see the directionality, or if the texture's throwing off the form, then you have to just go back in and really spend some more time with the painting so blend of texture and form. Doing a side-to-side motion in this highlighted area on the arm, which is going to make the arm feel more round rather than just up and down, which is the natural inclination for painters, is to just paint up and down, but then we forget about the width of things, which is really what causes the warmth. Adding a little highlight right there, it causes the illusion of the form to take place if you create side-to-side motions and curved motions with your paintbrush. Adding a bit of yellow in here. I might regret that, but so far so good, I think. We're gonna add some brighter yellow in here, making the form come out by doing the brush marks that I was telling you about that aren't just up and down, or it's almost as if our hand is on the form, moving with the form. I don't want to take away that gradient there. As you build the paint, just be mindful of preserving the light structure that you have established, unless it needs to shift slightly. But if you have the light structure pretty much where it needs to be, like the shapes of the lights and the darks, then you go in and you add more color, you risk messing it up a little bit. And that's fine. That's what I'm doing right now, is kind of messing it up, but it's intentional. I mean, you have to deconstruct to reconstruct, so, you know, as long as you intentionally preserve that light, if you mess it up to reconstruct it, that's great. Whatever you choose to do, just make sure you preserve the light structure in your painting, yeah. Just tweaking the directionality of a few things here and there. Okay. This is pretty good. I'm gonna go in and just tweak a few places in the feet. The hands are almost like little thermometers for Randall feet. Randall hands from Monsters, Inc. Although I'm sure that the frog came first. So really Randall has frog feet and hands, whatever. Same thing. I'm going back and forth between the black and the yellow. Which we mentioned earlier, that going back and forth between black and yellow can be a strange combination, because if those two colors mix too much, it turns into an annoying green color. This backhand is very much hidden in the shadow, so a lack of detail is necessary in order to convey the message that it's in the shadow. Paintings are an accumulation of little decisions made all throughout the process. I feel like in here needs to be a darker shade of yellow because it's under the body. So I added the brownish yellow into this foot. I'm gonna blend this shadow in with the back shadow area. Sometimes you gotta mix a few of your mixed blobs together to get the perfect medium tone. But basically the eye back here needs to blend with the nose. Again, not totally sure that this is considered a nose. If you know the correct names of frog and reptile anatomy, let me know in the comments. You have no choice. I'm kidding. You do. Highlighting it just a little, even though it's shaded. So usually there's a little light spot. In an area that's shaded, and you sometimes have to go back and forth. I'm getting there. But do you see how I'm just maintaining a healthy distance from my painting? That's so I can see the whole thing together, so that I don't get too hyperfixated on any one aspect of the painting, because it all only makes sense in context of the rest of the painting. In driving, overcorrecting is deadly. In painting, overcorrecting is necessary. So, because you can overcorrect to then just paint around it to make it make sense. Painting is like life, but there's no real risk to it. So, worst case scenario, you make a really bad painting. And you'd be surprised, a lot of people like really bad art. Some people think my art is bad, you know? It's subjective. So, but other people's opinion about your art shouldn't sway your decision on whether or not to make art, because Van Gogh didn't sell anything till after he was dead. So can you imagine if he didn't make art because he thought no one liked it? Wouldn't that be such a sad thing? So I hope you remember that if you're wondering if you should make art. The answer is yes. It's always yes. You should. Should is a wrong word because I don't want it to seem like something you have to do, but is it worth it to make art? And it is. A little highlight on the tailbone. A little highlight right here. Sometimes if your highlight isn't highlighting, you need to make the space around it darker, which is what I'm going to do right now with the mustard yellow. And then I'm going to take the black, carve around my shapes a little. stippling with the dark brown, or the dark yellow, light brownish, mustardy tone in here. It's raining outside. I don't know if you can hear it. You probably can, because this is an old industrial building where it's almost like being in a barn when it's raining. There's so much tin and whatnot. I mean, I don't know the exact material, but it's just it's kind of soothing, actually, so I think it works. Can you hear the rain? I'm just curious. Taking in your environment as you make art can be a crucial part of the process. So keep that in mind. If your environment is chaotic, it might be harder to make art. I admire people who are able to make art in the midst of chaos. Really, art is kind of a rebellious act in and of itself, because you're saying, this painting is more important than the other things in life. There's a lot of important stuff going on right now, but some people are made to do certain things. Some people are born for certain things. And it's no one's place to judge what other people do with their life. And making art is always going to be a part of my life. And I was born to do it. I truly was. If someone wants to debate me on that, they can. I'll win. That's one debate I will win. Just taking some time to make sure that the nose area is doing what it's supposed to do. I'm not even really sure what it's supposed to do. I've never looked this closely at a frog nose. Just want it to look like the right shape at the very least, which no one's going to be comparing it to the picture, but there we go. That looks decent. The good thing about nature is it could take any form, whereas portraiture, if one little thing is off, it's blaringly obvious and the whole painting is worthless. But like a frog, I mean, this could be any frog. I mean, who's to say that this particular frog doesn't have that particular nose? That's the great thing about painting nature. And I suppose portraiture is nature, but there's different expectations tied to it, which is that it looks like the person, identical to the person, or at least captures their essence at the very least. Some people are better at portraiture than others. I've always had a fascination with painting the likeness of people, which is why I have some celebrity portraits out there which get lumped into fan art. But it's a great opportunity to practice painting the likeness of a face, because if everyone knows that face and they recognize that face, then you know you did your job. It's a pretty straightforward assignment. There's a stripe here. The little feet are just perplexing, aren't they? It's not about what you paint that makes you... It's like once you learn how to paint one thing and truly paint it, you can pretty much paint anything. And although I will say I don't have a lot of experience painting frog feet, but okay, that just needs to be more shaded in there. It's obvious that that highlight is not highlighting. Even if the color is not an exact match that you're working on, as long as it's the right value, which means the right lightness or darkness in relationship to the rest of the painting, it'll function the way it should as a painting. If the value, the lightness or darkness of different aspects of the painting are out of place, then it's not going to function right and it's just going to look weird. So, alright, I'm going to take a minute and shift gears, taking this larger brush. And I'm going to add a thicker layer in here of light. We had started doing this earlier and I wanted to let it dry before I go back in. So here we are. Using some different variations of gray and even a little bit of like a gray blue to create the rock that this little guy is perched on. Bigger brush strokes towards the base of the canvas because we're trying to indicate that down here it's closer to the viewer, like the rock is kind of coming out and it's blending into the shadow. Using that scumbling technique where you can see the dark come through to create the illusion of texture on the rock. And then going back in with the black, scumbling over the white, allowing some of the white to come through in here as well. Adding some variation into the rock. Large, confident brush marks can go a long way. Let's go up here, add some thickness, some juicy thickness. So this painting would be much harder to paint over because it's so robust with the paint. Going in, finding those places with the black that need to be built up. in person, you can clearly see where the canvas is starting to show through a little bit. So I'm just taking a moment and building up the paint in those areas. Squinting my eyes from time to time. I want this to feel more like a crack, so going back in and, I don't know, finessing it a little bit. Doing some side to side motions, really adding thickness to the paint. Does that look good? Does it look bad? I don't know. Okay. Calming it down just a little. I have that feeling that it needs to be a bit more subdued than what I have here. Just in a few places. Okay. I feel like I need to do this. I feel like I just need to take my palette knife and just kind of mess it up a little. Can't explain it. Already that feels better. It's weird how that works, but okay. There's a subtle curve right there, and a subtle highlight in here. It was feeling a little flat. I couldn't really put my finger on it. Sometimes you have to simplify the image in the painting, which means taking away some of the details, which seems counterintuitive, but you don't need to paint every little detail, because sometimes that's what is holding your painting back from capturing the light and the essence of what it is that you're trying to portray. The few details you get in the painting can be so effective that the brain fills in everything else, which is scientific. That's a real thing. And painters know that. And so instead of painting every single little leaf or every little scale, you paint a few scales and you fake the rest by doing some technique that is all encompassing and more general, but the viewer won't recognize that, because again, the brain just fills in what it wants to see, what it thinks is there. So it's not about getting every little detail, it's about getting a few details. and making sure they're effective and accurate, and then finding a way to communicate that there's more of that there, but doing it in a way that's more general. Like I said, a technique that's all encompassing, like a stippling technique or something like that. Okay. That looks pretty good. Wow. Okay, I'm going to take a picture. Taking a picture is important because it allows you to turn your image black and white, which in turn allows you to see the light and dark structure and if it's accurate. Okay, I don't think that took. Let's try it again. I'll tell you right now, this is so distracting. I don't know why. It's maybe too bright. I'm going to take some black and paint over it and just bring it back down a little bit. Already that looks a million gajillion times better. I can't explain it, but it was just pulling my attention away from the frog. And one thing like that can ruin the entire painting. Because if there's something that's just like blaringly, annoyingly obvious that the painter doesn't see, but everyone else does, you screwed yourself. Okay. My camera's freaking out. Okay, let's see. It didn't take that picture again. Weird. Seriously, I need a new camera. I've had this, or I need a new phone. I've had this one since 2019. So, okay. It's getting there. I feel like that looks good. I will say I have an inclination that I may take this paper and collage it in the back and then integrate it back into the painting with paint. So I'm gonna let it dry. I'm not gonna hyperfixate on it too much right now. I think it's at a nice and reasonable stopping point. And then let me know if you think this is a good idea. As you can see, it's actually paper I got from, I think, Zeb's in Rhode Island on my birthday. And it has a really cool retro look. And so I think if I put it back there and just integrate it, it's going to add an unexpected layer, for lack of better words, to this painting. So I love texture. I love found paper. I love found objects. I love anything that's physically there. That's why I love paint as opposed to photography. Photography is great, but it's always digital. Painting is physically there, it's a sculpture. Okay, so we may do that. I would love to know if you think that's a nice idea. And you may not have the vision I have, so it's okay if you don't. Anyways, I want to thank you so much for being here, for being in my corner. And I'm excited to share with you more of my creative process, and I hope that you learned a thing or two. And I hope that you fall asleep. I appreciate you, and